You're probably familiar with the Christmas story of the three kings who follow the star to the manger, bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the Christ child. However, what we have digested from popular culture is not quite the same as what we find in Matthew's Gospel, the only one of the four to include the tale. It's never said that there were three kings. This assumption seems to rest on the three different kinds of gifts that were brought. The kings also do not go to a manger to see Jesus, but to a house. And in fact, these kings are not called kings at all, but Magi. The Magi were priests of the Zoroastrian religion, well known in the ancient world for their skilled practice at astrology, which was then widely considered a science. Matthew's Gospel notes that the Magi came from the east, something that is another likely reference to the men being Zoroastrian priests, as Persia was the center of the Zoroastrian religion in antiquity. According to the Gospel, the Magi go to Jerusalem and ask King Herod where the Messiah is alleged to be born, stating that they have seen his star. Herod sends them to Bethlehem, while the star leads them on to the house where Jesus is staying. The Magi then worship Jesus, but decide not to return to Herod after being warned by God in a dream. Why would pagan priests visit the Christ child, or why would the author of Matthew claim that they did? I believe this is possibly because of two reasons. One of these may be that the author wanted to emphasize the importance of Jesus by showing that leaders of another religion in another part of the world traveled to visit him and pay their respects. The other reason is because of something called the star prophecy from Numbers 24:17. The oldest recognition of this passage as a messianic prophecy is a document among the Dead Sea Scrolls called the War Scroll, written sometime in the 2nd or 1st century BCE. The star prophecy was associated with a number of Messiah figures leading up to the Jewish revolt, and the historian Josephus even applied it to the Emperor Vespasian. In other words, this had come to be seen as one of the most important criteria for the Messiah by the time of Jesus. Well, who better to testify to the fulfillment of this prophecy than a class of people renowned throughout the ancient world for their skills in astrology and celestial observation? Thus, the author of Matthew probably used the Magi as a means of supporting his messianic claims about Jesus. Of course, more conservative Christians will disagree. On an apologetics website simply titled The Theist, we find another explanation for the Magi's appearance in Matthew's Gospel. The star was only visible to the astrologers, and it didn't lead them directly to Jesus, but rather to Herod, who wanted Jesus dead. It was Satan's plan to lead these astrologers to Jesus so that Herod could kill him, the star that hangs upon the pagan Christmas trees of countless Christians. The text of Matthew's Gospel does not state anywhere that only the Magi saw the star, or that the star led them to Herod. It certainly does not lend any credence to the idea that Satan deceived the Magi as part of a plan to kill Jesus. This explanation ignores the star prophecy and the revelation God gives to the Magi, too, both of which would seem to indicate a godly rather than satanic plan. This author's contention stems from a clear assumption of faith. The Magi could not have been anything orchestrated by God, because the Bible doesn't approve of astrology or pagan religions. But does the Bible really oppose astrology? There are passages like Leviticus 19:26 and Deuteronomy 18:10-12 which warn against practicing divination. Isaiah 47:13-14 also appears to depict astrology as a futile practice, if not an irreligious one as well. However, the story of the Magi in Matthew is not the only instance where the Bible appears to be more supportive of astrology. You may remember Genesis 1:14 from my videos and articles on the firmament, the solid dome sky of the ancient cosmos. In Genesis 1:14 we read that God put lights in the firmament to separate the day from the night, saying, "Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." While some argue that signs means simply the signs of day and night, or other similar designations, it's hard to reconcile this with the additional mention of seasons, days, and years that is already in the passage. Why state the same thing twice? The Hebrew word used for signs is also found in Isaiah 8:18, where it is used for signs and wonders, which typically denotes miracles or omens. God asks some interesting questions of Job in Job 38. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth a constellation in its seasons and guide the bear with her sons? Do you know the ordinance of the heavens or fix their rule over the earth? Although the Pleiades and Orion are both constellations, they are also astrological. The word translated as constellation in this passage is Mazaroth, which has probable origins in the old Akkadian word Manzaltu. Manzaltu means station, as in the position of a planet in the zodiac. The last question about the ordinance of the heavens and fixing their rule over the earth could well be astrological too, implying the standards of the ancient zodiac and how they relate to things on earth. As one more additional example, Judges 5:20 mentions that the stars of heaven fought from their courses against Sisera. Some have speculated that this refers to a meteor shower or is simply a case of poetic language, but it could just as likely refer to an astrological omen, to the same effect as saying the stars are against it. So how does one account for such apparently conflicting passages that seem both tolerant and intolerant of astrology? One explanation could be the insider's defense, as I call it. What would be wrong in any outside circumstance is permissible when it's sanctioned by the religion or God. When the Pharaoh's magicians transform their staffs into snakes, it's sorcery or illusion. But when Moses transforms his staff into a snake, it's a miracle because it's allegedly done by the power of God. Likewise, the Bible may condemn pagan astrology while allowing its own unique brand of astrology. Another explanation which may work in concert with the insider's defense is derived from an understanding of the composition of these texts we've discussed. The documentary hypothesis has shown the Torah to be the compilation of at least 4 different traditions pieced together over time by a number of redactors. When we look at the difference between the anti-astrology passages and the ones that seem to support it, we notice that the former appear later in Hebrew tradition. During the mid to late 7th century BCE, King Josiah instituted several reforms in the hopes of uniting the 2 kingdoms of Israel and Judah. A major part of Josiah's reforms involved exclusive worship of Yahweh, and this was achieved by outlawing many things even resembling pagan practices. Most biblical scholars associate Deuteronomy with the reforms of Josiah, identifying the text as the mysterious book of the law Josiah is said to have found in 2 Kings 22:8. Isaiah 47 is part of a secondary addition to the book of Isaiah that is typically dated to during the time of the exile, as I mentioned in my last video on Isaiah 53. Finally, Leviticus is placed in the post-exilic period, long after Josiah's reforms. However, the pro-astrology passages are found in texts that date to before the reign of Josiah. The 2 exceptions are Judges 5:20 and, of course, Matthew 2. Yet Judges may preserve some earlier material, and both texts use astrology in a manner that is specifically beneficial to the religious views of their authors. So they fit well within the insider's defense. The issue of astrology in ancient Judaism and Christianity is a complicated one. Just as there are disagreements among believers today, there were disagreements among believers then, and this may partially account for the variant ideas in the Bible. Interestingly, archaeologists have discovered a number of synagogues from the 3rd to 5th centuries CE that have zodiac mosaics in their design, like this one found at Tiberias. Astrology, it seems, is less at odds with the Judeo-Christian scriptures than we might think.